لله ونستغفره ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور انفسنا ومن سيئات اعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. واشهد ان لا اله الا الله وحده لا شريك له واشهد ان سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله. All praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May the blessings of Allah be upon His Messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sallam. Brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Apologies for the bit of delay we had. We had a bit of a belated dinner, so we had to delay the lecture as well, amongst other reasons. Just a note in advance for those who are looking at the screen. Inshallah, I know there has been some expectations to watch a video clip, but due to some technicalities, we have decided to drop that part of the lecture, inshallah. So you have to bear with us, inshallah. And we'll carry on with the lecture as intended with the same title, inshallah. And I'm sure our guest, Sheikh Tamimi, will be benefiting us out of his, inshallah, wit and knowledge about this subject. The title of this lecture, as we have announced before, the media and the negative betrayal of the media about Islam. Was it like that, Sheikh Ali? Portrayal. Portrayal as well. Inshallah, Sheikh Ali has introduced you, so without further ado, I'll pass the microphone to the Sheikh.
Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ba'd. Just regarding the video, I mean, one of the reasons also is because this is a masjid, it's not a lecture hall, and it's not proper. We should have respect for Allah's house to show necessarily videos of this nature in a masjid. That's one of the reasons. Just so nobody in the future, I'm saying that so nobody in the future sees a screen and then thinks, well, they can do it in the masjid. So it's important this one. Now, the lecture, as we heard, the title of it is regarding the negative portrayal of Islam in the media. And what I'd like to do in this lecture, I have basically three aims. The first aim, that we understand exactly, that this media war against Islam is not something new, but rather, this microphone's very big, but rather is something that it really extends back to the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so therefore, what we're experiencing in terms of the vilifying and mocking of Islam and Muslims and media is not something which we should be surprised about, but rather that this is something which goes back to the time of the Prophet ﷺ and will continue so long as there's truth and falsehood on the earth. That's the first aim. The second aim is to try to shed some light about the dangers of media today and the dangers it poses to the Muslims and their understanding of the religion and their applying the religion. And how that in this age, unlike in previous times, the danger is great and the danger is there. The third aim I have in the lecture is to talk about, really the situation with Muslim media, and to sort of point out some of the problems we are facing with Muslim media, besides the fact that we just don't have enough resources. That's something that can be all sense, but in terms of the message, the content of the message, what is Islamic media, and why is the message that we're trying to spread, the content of it, why is it not really strong as it should be? What are some of the weaknesses we have? And then finally, I would like to shed some light on some recent experiences the Muslims had regarding media in the United States, in particular with the movie The Siege, even though what I'll relate to you is secondhand because I wasn't a participant in some of those things, but the brothers I studied together with FCA, comfortable circles and so forth, were some of the brothers who were active in this, and so I heard from them, and perhaps I can share with you some of that, and also to conclude to put a proposal before my brothers here in the United Kingdom and also elsewhere, if somebody gets this tape and so forth, of what I think we should start looking towards when it comes to issues of media. So that's a brief outline of what I hope to set out during this lecture. Now, the first one. we should understand that the issue of negative portrayal of Islam, the negative, imagery and the negative talk about Islam and Muslims is not something new. It goes back to the Prophet ﷺ. In fact, if we look at the Prophet ﷺ's seerah, his first public announcement of the da'wah, his first public proclamation of his messengership to the Quraysh, we find negative response, a negative verbal response, which in a primitive sense is a form of media. What am I referring to? Well, I'm referring to an incident that I'm sure all of us are aware of, when the Prophet ﷺ was commanded to spread the message, and he goes to the mountain, one of the mountains of Mecca, and he calls the tribe of Quraysh by all its sections, one by one, and some of the major members of his family, and says to them, if I was to tell you that there was an army behind this mountain, would you, preparing to attack you, would you believe me? And that they say, yes, we have never experienced from you any sort of deceit, any sort of lying. And he tells them, verily I am the messenger of Allah, or I'm a warner sent to you before a severe torment. And then Abu Lahab starts the process of the negative media, starts the process of attacking the Prophet ﷺ by saying, Tabban laka, woe to you, or may your affair turn to ruin. Have you gathered us for this? In other words, this is something, nonsensical. This is something which is, a lunacy. What are you gathering us for? You brought all of us in Mecca so we can hear this? So here comes the process. It starts. And we find then that, the Prophet ﷺ in Mecca is accused of a number of things. He's accused of being a sorcerer. And that if you listen to him, his magic will affect you. He'll put you underneath his spell. And the proof that he's a sorcerer, he's splitting up families. Father and son are in conflict. Husband and wife are in conflict. These people are following him. He must be a sorcerer. So we find some of the people coming to Mecca, and they're, putting, not cotton, but they're putting things in their ear, so they're afraid they might bump into Muhammad, even though they don't know who Muhammad is. Might bump into him, and if they hear his message, they might be under a spell. This is an example from the seerah. Some of them say that, all he's doing is bringing us old stories. Just the stories of the old peoples. And so we find another bin al-Harith, one of the leaders of the pagans in Mecca, goes to Iraq and buys some singing girls who can read, start singing to the Meccans stories of the Persian kings and the epics that are around their lives. We find that they say that, he made up the Quran himself. He's just a poet. And just wait a few years, he'll just end like all other poets end, like Zuhair and Nabitha, these pagan poets. They were popular for a while. They died, and their poetry was okay. You might recite some of it, but they're forgotten. They had no effect upon society. You find they say that somebody's actually teaching him this book. And one time they say a Roman boy who was a slave in Mecca. That didn't make any sense because that Roman boy didn't speak Arabic. And so they said, well, no, he's being assisted by some other people. Well, who are those people? And then just some other people. They don't care to point it out. Sometimes they say, well, really, he has deceptive motives. Don't believe in him. That he's saying he's coming to promise you paradise and to bring you happiness in this world and last. But he's secretly trying to make a movement in order so he can take control of Mecca. Because he's looking to put himself in power, and he shouldn't trust him. They also say, look at his followers. His followers are the worst of the society. That shows that his message must be not of any value. Who's following him but slaves, but the weak, the oppressed, all of the nobles, all of the important people in society? None of us are following him. And so, you find that this, rumors and this negative portrayal of the Prophet ﷺ, his followers, and negative portrayal of the message of Islam is the beginning of this negative media against the Prophet ﷺ. For instance, you find them even taking issues, using world events to try to further their message. You find that the Prophet ﷺ, because he had a scripture, the Quran, the pagans of Mecca, when the battle occurred between the Romans and the Persians, and the Persians defeated the Romans, the pagans said, okay, you see, this is another evidence that we're upon the truth. Because the pagans, the Persians, are fire worshippers, they don't have a scripture. And so therefore, we will also become victorious. This is a type of, a propaganda against the Prophet ﷺ. Likewise, when the Prophet ﷺ came and informed them of his Isra, that in one night he went from Mecca to Jerusalem and then went to the seven heavens and back down and then came back to Mecca, they said, okay, now we got it. So they started to go to the Muslims. They said to them, do you believe this man? He's insane. It takes us months to go by caravan from Mecca to Jerusalem. How is it that in one night he went to Jerusalem and then went to the seven heavens and then came back? And some Muslims even left Islam because of that. And Abu Bakr, of course, and to which he earned the title of Siddiq, when he said this, he said, well, I believe in something which is more greater than that. I believe that comes a revelation from the heavens down to him. So of course I believe in that. When the pagan Arabs used to eat carrion, they used to eat meat which was not slaughtered. Just if an animal would die, they would just cut it up and eat it. And so they started to spread this argument amongst the Muslims. They would say to them, well look, this animal which has died, Allah's killed it. And when you slaughter that animal, you killed it. So how is it that you're not going to eat what Allah killed, and you eat what you killed? This was an argument they tried to do in order to cause doubt in the minds of the Muslims. We find the Jews, when the Prophet ﷺ goes to Medina, the Jews begin a large number of rumors against the Prophet ﷺ. The Quran tells us that they enter into Islam in the morning, and so by nighttime they come out, and they disbelieve in order to bring doubt among the people. The hypocrites, when the Prophet ﷺ faced some setbacks in battle, they said, as the Quran told us, مَا وَعَدْنَا اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ إِلَّا غُرُورًا, that Allah and His Messenger only promised us deceitfully. I mean, they only fooled us. There's no victory. We've died in the battlefield in order to cause doubt among the Muslims. When the Prophet ﷺ was given the command to stop to face Jerusalem and to face Mecca in prayer, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, the sufaha, the ignorant, the foolish will say, مَا وَلَّاهُمْ عَنْ قِبْلَتِهِمْ, what made them turn away from their qibla that they were facing? Another rumor, another media attack. When the adhan was brought, was instituted and legislated, they said, Allah tells us in the Quran, وَإِذَا نَادَيْتُمْ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ اتَّخَذُوهَا هُزُوًا, that if you call to prayer, they take it as a mockery and as sport. So they would make fun of the adhan. When the Prophet ﷺ would go out on a battle, the hypocrites would spread the rumors, we heard that he died. He died in the battle. He's dead. And so the Muslims, like the women and the children and the old and those who were infirm and who couldn't go out, they would feel great despair and great sadness and would cry because they had the rumors came to the Prophet ﷺ had died. And if the Prophet ﷺ would decide on a certain battle expedition not to go forth, but stay in Medina, they would say, you see, he's a coward. He doesn't want to go and face the enemy. He doesn't want to face the chance of dying. So he's staying back behind. And then when the Prophet ﷺ, for instance, in one battle, when he went forward and he left Ali ibn Abi Talib in Medina's in charge, they said, you see, he's leaving his son-in-law because he doesn't want his daughter's husband to die. And so Ali comes to the Prophet ﷺ crying, because the hypocrites are saying this about him. And so the Prophet ﷺ consoles him and says, are you not pleased that your position to me is like the position of Aaron, Harun was to Moses, to Musa, alayhim as-salam. But however, there's no prophet after him. In the same way that Musa, alayhi salam, when he went for 40 days, the promise of his Lord to receive the testament, the rulings and so forth, Harun was left in charge of the children of Israel. And many other examples. I mean, when it came to the issue of Aisha, they spread the rumors that she had, infidelity and so forth, and they caused turmoil in Medina. And so, therefore, you find, if you look at the history of the Prophet ﷺ, from when he started da'wah in Mecca, when he was told, commanded by Allah to publicly spread Islam, until his death, there was constant attacks upon the message of Islam. And if you look at the seerah, you also find that there were even poets. The Arabs used the means of media means which they were, able to at that time, through poetry. So there were poets who would make poetry against Islam, against the Prophet ﷺ, in order for it to spread among the Arab tribes. And the Prophet ﷺ also had his own poets who would make poetry in defense of Islam, among which was Hassan bin Thabit. And the Prophet ﷺ told Hassan to recite your poetry. For so long as you are defending Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the angel Jibreel, Allah also the angel Jibreel, which will strengthen you, and give you vigor, to say what you have to say. And that is why we find in the seerah examples, especially when the Prophet ﷺ was in Mecca, one incident when the Prophet ﷺ is presenting Islam to some Arabs, not from the Quraysh, one of the marketplaces, and the Prophet ﷺ calls them to Islam. And what happened? They don't want to accept Islam, and the reason why the man says, he says, because his people know better upon him. And the boy, who later becomes a Muslim, I forgot the name of the Sahabi, he says that, we saw this red-faced man, following him, and it was Abu Lahab. So whenever the Prophet ﷺ would go to a tribe, Abu Lahab would follow him and say, this is our young man, he's from our people, saying Abu Lahab is one of the leaders of the Banu Hashim, one of the leaders of the Quraysh. And this is our son, he's insane. And so the Arab tribes would say, well, his people know better, and so, we should just not pay attention to this message. So the point is that, I hope by giving just these few examples, we recognize that this notion that Islam is an object of a disfiguring of its teachings, of its followers, is not something new. It's not something that just occurred with the satanic verses of Salman Rushdie, or is occurring with his films in the United States, but rather it's something which goes back to the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and it's a matter which will continue until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inherits the earth and all that is on it. And so therefore, we come to the conclusion, if one really looks at it, there's not a single belief or a single legislation of Islam except that you find hundreds, tens and hundreds of arguments against it, and people criticize it. Not just only the popular matters, but even those matters which are, you would think that are not significant. Why would somebody take issue with it? For instance, we know the popular matters which people take issue with Islam and the negative media portrays. For instance, women in hijab, right? They say it's restrictive and so forth, and women are not allowed their freedoms and so forth. But you find an issue like wudu and the idea of purifying yourself. And Salman Rushdie, in the satanic verses, made fun of this, and he's quoting, lying against Salman al-Farisi, of course. That Salman al-Farisi, one day gets angry and throws down like a vessel with water and says, please, constant ablution, I'm constantly being forced to clean myself and so forth. And one of the scenes which is replayed often in this movie, The Siege, is that what you find is that whenever the Muslims, the terrorists are going to make up a bomb to blow up some innocent people, they make wudu before that. But if one was to think about it, okay, you find the Islamic religion, not appealing to you and so forth. What is this phobia that you have with the issue of wudu? What is it about washing one's hands or washing one's face? That's a big issue that, it becomes now, something which, it enrages you to that degree. So, the point is that even matters which we would consider, not to be issues that, that people take a big issue about, to the unbelievers, it's a big issue, and their media would take action or would take notice to it and try to disfigure that. Now, the reality is this constant, negative portrayal of Islam, its teachings, its prophet, its work, its followers, obviously leads people not to accept the message of Islam. This is something I think we all have experienced, right? That when you come to Muslims, you find that, that people have a phobia of Muslims. People, imagine that Muslims are just there, ready just to pull out a knife and just put it in him or, kill him and so forth. One of the brothers who attends the classes, the brothers who we sit in Washington, D.C., he was telling us a story that he's a revert to Islam, and his boss didn't know that he was a Muslim. And, his boss was Jewish, but he wasn't a practicing Jew, a secular Jew. He knew nothing about Judaism. So one day the brother said to him, well, I'm a Muslim. The boss said to him, I can't believe that. I mean, you're just too nice, And he just kept on arguing, okay, you're trying to fool me, you're pulling my leg and so on. And the brother was saying, no, I really am, a Muslim, And then the boss person said, if I ever knew that you were a Muslim, before I hired you, I would never hired you because I would have been so afraid to bring a Muslim into my workplace. So, I mean, that's just a typical example of, how the negative media affects the lives of just people who don't necessarily have a belief, do not necessarily have, come with a position towards Islam, but because of this media, they are turned to that. Now, the next matter which we need to understand is the nature of media today. Media today is unlike media at any time before. Rather, media today is something which is unique in human history and is not something which is very restricted, but rather is very widespread. And what I'd like to do is to give some sort of examples to that. One of the books describing the fall of the Soviet Union argued that one of the main reasons why the Soviet Union fell was once media started to reach the Soviet Union. Because once the argument was that, in this book, that among the factors was that because when the communists in Eastern Europe began to receive video images of how Europeans lived in Western Europe, and they started to see the great difference between them in terms of poverty and so forth. And then they started to realize that what they're being told by their governments, that they are technically advanced and that they're rich and so forth, is not true. It started to make a swell of a movement within Eastern Europe of the great dissatisfaction to the situation. So this was the author is arguing this is one of the main reasons, or the major reason in his view, causing the fall of the Soviet Union. And if we look at the effects of media today around the world, it is really something remarkable. A number of articles appeared in the Washington Post this last October under the title "American Pop Penetrates Worldwide." And the article starts off by telling us that America's biggest export is no longer food. It's no longer industrial matters like steel or cars or anything. It's not even from their factories, but the biggest export in terms of dollars for the United States now is popular culture. In terms of movies, TV programs, music, books, and computer software. And as a result, entertainment around the world is dominated by American-made products. In fact, they cite in the article that international sales of entertainment products totaled $60.2 billion in 1996, which is more than any other American industry. And that doesn't take into consideration all the billions of dollars which were generated due to pirating. Illegal copying of like movies and films and music tapes and so forth. And in fact, they quote a sociologist, Todd Gitlin, who said that American popular culture is the latest in a long succession of bidders for global unification. It succeeds the Latin imposed by the Roman Empire and the Catholic Church, and the Marxist-Leninism imposed by communist governments. Of course, the sociologists just skipped about the influence of Islam and Arabic on the world, but be that as it may, but they see it as the sociologists what is trying to say that American popular culture now is becoming a means to unify the world over a specific type of belief and ideas. And Tom Preston, who's the president of MTV, is quoted as saying this: today's young people have passports to two different worlds, to their own culture and to ours. And so therefore, the article explains that as a result, not only is it what you find in American movies in terms of like the fast cars, the blowing up of buildings, and the sex and so forth. That's not what is also being sold. But the article says that the ideals of America, the myths that the United States is built upon in terms of individuality, wealth, progress, tolerance, optimism, all these themes that come in underneath movies and so forth, outside of just the blowing up buildings and the spaceships that are invading and so forth, these notions are also filtering into people. And so therefore, according to other sociologists, that what happens is that people around the world start seeing these images, and they start to then not only want the material wealth of the Americans, but they want the ideals of the Americans. They want the sense of motion, and they want a sense of a private utopia. In other words, what does a private utopia mean? Well, utopia means a perfect state. And so the idea of a private perfect state, a private utopia means, a perfect world for yourself, that you could have just what you want, you really don't care, which is the individualism, which is the central feature of the West. And then it says that, it talks about that, however, there are religious conservatives of many different denominations who consider American culture is still the noisy electronic spawn of the great Satan, undermining traditional values, encouraging wickedness, and U.S. movies and television promote mindless consumerism, others complain, and emit a toxic vapor that chokes the wellspring of native creativity. And then it talks about, the article then gives an example of the body that in Afghanistan. It's all ordered, their citizens to be morally, people entertainment, people are most, and that in China, is slowly and inevitably becoming borderless. The second are aware of this, only about, gives an example, they can't, the article performed poorly in the United States, affected so much abroad into the, even though he's no longer popular today, because they have been visited by him seats for actresses' front. The guarantee, the Americans hit in theater. And even expecting that it's going to Disney from the capital of Iran, and it's also elaborated upon. The media now thinks that you can no words and turn off the lights and expect it not to come in. It talks about that, for instance, gives an example of a person by the name of Saxon, who's 28 years old. And so by him being 28 years old, this is 1998, right? That means he was born when? 1970, okay? So it means when the Iranian Revolution came about, he was how old? 9 years old. So it means all his formative years, in terms of his education and so forth, right, was underneath the Iranian Revolution. So one would imagine, given that the Iranian Revolution talks about America as a great Satan and so forth, that you may have an aversion to American entertainment. But however, the article tells us that Saxon had nothing but praise. For instance, he's nuts about the movie Titanic, and they watched the movie on bootleg video cassettes, which were taped inside movie theaters in the United States, and within days of its release in the United States, the movie is in Iran. And Saxon says, I've memorized every line of the movie. All right? And he has a particular fondness for one of the ladies in the movie. And, and then he says this statement. He says, what do we call this in Iran? A cultural invasion? Whether it's accidental or not, it's a fact. And we cannot do anything to stop it. American culture is very dominant. The article then tells about that the fact that even though the movies are officially banned, bootleg copies of the latest U.S. films are widely available in Iran. And it's rare that you find in Iran a teenager who lacks at least a passing familiarity with the music of Michael Jackson or Madonna. Anti-American slogans share wall space with spray-painted odes to Metallica and Guns N' Roses. Persian bookstores are filled with Persian translations of novels by John Bishop, Sidney Sheldon, and Danielle Steele. These are contemporary writers who write on different love themes and so forth. Okay, and so then the article says, to a greater degree, perhaps than in any country, the easy availability of American popular culture in the closed society of Iran demonstrates its appeal across political, religious, and ethnic boundaries. It also shows, this is what the article is saying, it also shows the futility of trying to screen it out in an age when digital images fly across international telephone lines at the speed of light, and Hollywood movies can be widely disseminated by anyone with a video cassette recorder. So, that's, I think, the underlying point. And then it talks about, it gives some examples from Afghanistan, and how also in Afghanistan, even with the Taliban, you still find, this great cultural offensive. And it quotes some of the Iranians who regard this as a great offense, and they are, very concerned about this. And the article, but I think the important point of the article was, what the last thing which I read was that, in the world that we're living now, with this unbelievable, means of communication, which is widespread, and it's such cheap, not very expensive. It's impossible for us now to block out the images. It's impossible for us to imagine that the message that they're trying to send will not become spread in Muslim land. I remember, about 11 or 12 years ago, I was in Mecca making i'tikaf, and, young men were, when they heard that I and some other brothers from the United States, they took us to the side and they would ask us about Michael Jackson. And they wanted to know the latest news about him. And they would just tell us something like that. We were embarrassed, to ask you. And stuff. These were young brothers who, young boys, 11, 12, 13 years old, who were studying Quran and so forth. But, they were still enamored by the whole notion. And they had heard about it. They felt it was something important for them to know. So, this is, something. And I remember my wife, she was telling me that a couple of years ago when she went to visit her people who lived in some sort of valley in the Arabian desert where they just got roads there. And, they don't have anything there. It's just a desolate place on the face of the earth. All the women in the valley were asking my wife, do you have the Arabic spoken there, English, satellite dish? And then to watch, these things that, all these things they were watching were things in Italian and French. They had no idea what it was about, but all they did was spend all day long just sitting and watching those images. And when my wife said, we don't have satellite dishes. He said, American satellite dishes is not even popular. We have cable. More. He was surprised. In America, you guys are really, poorly off, not satellite dishes. So, the point is that, obviously, media, its influence and effect is not something which is just limited to something that you can just just turn off the signal, not to take it, but it's something so pervasive now that it's touching every single corner of the earth. Okay. So if that's the case then, and we really cannot shut it off, what does that require of us? It requires of us that we have a strong Islamic media. And so we should first start off by defining what do we mean by the term Islamic media. What do we mean by that term? Well, we mean by this a means or a vehicle by which we can spread the principles of Islam and its teachings to all people around the world. And that we can give good news to those people who want to follow Islam, that they will not only have what they're looking for in this life in terms of spiritual ease and in terms of tranquility and so forth, but also the good news of the paradise, that they will live paradise the hereafter. And also, warn people that, look, if you don't accept this message which Allah has sent to you, you are placing yourself, you're facing danger of destruction and hellfire. And another factor would be to correct and to these false images of Islam being given, and to make sure people understand, what Islam is about by, correcting these ideas against Islam. However, though, if you look at Islamic media today, unfortunately, Muslims have no media person. Not only do Muslims don't have, in terms of the great media needs, in terms of the material needs, like we don't have internet providers, we don't have big updates, route internet signals, we don't have satellites, we don't have magazines, we don't have the ability to print books. I mean, in the United States, when they print a book, they print millions of copies of books, right? When the brothers print a book, they say, oh, we printed 3,000 copies. That's a great thing, 3,000 copies, mashallah. I mean, an Islamic magazine that has, 12,000 issues printed per month, 12,000 issues, that's unbelievable, Well, magazines like Time magazines, millions of issues are printed on a weekly basis. I mean, this is just the great thing. But that's something, the material thing is something which is maybe out of our hands, but what about the content? What about the content of the Islamic message? Unfortunately, the content of the Islamic message, we face two problems with the content of the Islamic message. The first problem with the content of the Islamic message is that, in order for any media message to be successful, it has to be understood easily. Yeah, that's the success. In commercials, right? Why are commercials hour-long things, right? Because they want to get a message across. So they make it, really quick and easy to get the message. It doesn't require for you to sit there and contemplate that message and try to understand it. It's a quick, they call it sound bite, 30 seconds, images are seen to you, you get the message, and it hopes, if it's effective, you'll make a reaction from you on your part. You go buy the product or, something to that effect. Now, the problem with the Islamic message is that, while in its essence, Islam is something which is easy to understand and easy to apply, Allah in the Quran says, that the Quran has been made easy to memorize. Is there somebody to memorize it? You find that actually when Muslims explain the religion of Islam, they make it so complex sometimes. Not everybody is studying to be a scholar. Okay? So when one explains Islam to the general populace of the Muslims, when one explains Islam to the general body of humanity, one has to bring it down to a very basic level in terms of beliefs, in terms of practices, and in terms of actions. Likewise, another reason why the Islamic message, the message being given by Islamic media fails, is because we do not present Islam as the only alternative to what people are upon. Islam normally is presented, when given as a message around the world, as well, Islam is good, and Islam is nice, and Islam promotes peace and promotes mercy and so forth. But it's not given as the message of, that this is the truth that Allah has sent to you with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And your success in this world and in the hereafter is dependent upon you accepting the truth. That here are the evidence as to why it's true. This type of aggressive media is not presented at all. Another reason why the Islamic media fails in presenting its message in terms of its content is that it does not present the total picture. It talks about small, little issues, not little issues, particulars, without giving the total, wide worldview. And so therefore, when people want to take a reaction to Islam, they don't see it in its broad sense. They see it in a very specific, narrow sense. So they might not see its applicability. And so this is another reason as the failure due to the content of Islamic. A fourth reason is that until now, Muslims still are relying primarily upon the classical means of presenting their message. A khatib gets up and he gives a khutbah, Salat al-Jum'ah. Somebody comes, he gives a lecture, as if this is sufficient. Of course, without doubt, I have no doubt in my mind, if every khatib, when he gave his Jum'ah khutbah around the Islamic world, really put the effort and took the time to prepare the khutbah and dealt with the problems of the people, that would be in itself an unbelievable message. and as the khutbah during the Hajj time was given to the Muslims and dealt with their issues in such a strong manner, to be an unbelievable message. And likewise, the lectures that people hold and so forth, deal with the problems of people and gives them Islamic solution, to be an unbelievable message. But at the same time, we cannot restrict ourselves to this. I mean, people now have satellites, they have the use of the internet and so forth. It's required that we fully utilize these means in order to present our message. However, though, there is something which we have to understand, that our message, the Islamic media, is da'wah in the end. And so therefore we cannot fall into the errors of secular media. Secular media is based upon lying. Secular media is based upon distortion of facts. Secular media is based upon using people's desires in order for them to believe in their message or get to buy their product. But yet when we have our media, we are still required that we must speak the truth always. We cannot lie even against our enemies. We cannot, use, like for instance, let's say, what we'll do is we'll make Islamic music videos in order to, gather the people to Islam. So we have dancing and so forth. I mean, this is not permissible in our religion, because in the end, the means that we use have to be pure means. They have to be means which come from the Quran and from the Sunnah. And so therefore, the task of, getting into the media and being, aware of to what the media presents and so forth is something which is very important. So now let me come to the final 2 points of my lecture. Regarding the movie The Siege. What is the Biomass Race? We have an organization in the United States which even though I'm not part of it in the sense of a number, but I'm part of it in the sense of my feelings of support to them, just like many of us Muslims in the United States, which has done really a great job in terms of trying to counter the stereotypes that Muslims are a portrayal of Muslims and Islam in the media. And you might have heard about it looking at some of their releases on the Internet CARE, the Council for American and Islamic Relations. And a couple of years ago, I guess, or a year or so, when they heard about the production of this movie, they began to try to negotiate with the movie producers. I mean, obviously, you don't have the power in the United States, the political power, to put an end to a movie, right? You don't have that type of lobby and that type of influence. What they tried to negotiate with the producers of the movie in order to try to remove some of the negative imagery in the movie and to try to maybe change the plot and so forth. So it's not a plot about Muslims killing innocent people and so forth. And they met with limited success in that, a very poor success. So what happened was when they found that really the calls were not being heard, they decided to have a look at every single movie theater in the major cities regarding this movie, where what they would do was they asked the brothers to go there, not to make any sort of violent gestures or to shout or something like that, but just to pass out this leaflet that they had, calling people to a designated masjid the next day when there was going to be an open, and they passed out these leaflets. And on the next day, because the movies open up Friday night in the United States, on Saturday was an open Islamic day where people were told to come and find out about Islam. Now, it's too early now to judge the success of that. I mean, we don't know if people have become Muslims or so on, because, I mean, I asked one of the brothers before I came last week in our class, and he said that they're still getting the reports about the different success around the country. Different communities are sending the reports what they did. But what they did find, which was very clear, was that the movie producers became on under defense. And what you found was that the movie producers in major newspapers like in the Washington Post, in the New York Times, on major news broadcasts, started to come out and say, well, actually, the movie, we made the movie to defend Islam and the Muslims, or not Islam, but defend the Muslims. Right? Because the theme of the movie is what? That there are terrorists who blow up buildings and kill people in Brooklyn. And so as a result, the American government is forced to enforce martial law, and they take all the Muslims indiscriminately and place them in prisoner of war camps and so forth, internment camps. And that's the theme of the basic theme of the movie. So the directors start to come out and say, the writers of the movie say, well, actually what we were trying to do was we were trying to show that, we shouldn't allow few terrorist attacks lead us to take these, extreme measures like this. So we're trying to open up a debate. A lot of those are their hearts, right? Okay. But the point is that the fact that they actually had to come out and say that statement, right, show that even the littlest effort by Muslims to concerted effort, put them in some sort of quandary, some sort of fear that that this might result in a negative image for them. And in the end, what they understand is the money in their pocket. Okay. The other matter is that I read an article by one of it's a Christian Arab who wrote an article regarding the movie, and a lot of the Arab American groups, from the perspective that they're Arabs and Arabs are being demonized in the movie, even though they're Christians or not necessarily Muslim. And he wrote an article saying that what they were trying to do is they're trying to stop the movie from being spread to Arab-speaking countries. Because what's happening is that all these movies that are being made by Hollywood are being watched and being bought, and millions of dollars are being spread. And so they explained that, for instance, there was certain movies which were being shown on certain international flights by certain Arab nations, some of their airlines and so forth. They tried to contact those airlines to pull the movies off those airlines, and they were trying to do something, but they had met very limited success. The point is that in reality, we face a major media onslaught. It's a media war. And this war is a lot easier for people in order to spread their ideas to physically fight. I mean, to actually engage in warfare in terms of, preparing armies and then sending those armies across thousands of miles to fight in foreign lands, to take those countries and to fight and then to try to force their ideas upon those people. That can no longer be done. It's very difficult. And history has shown that whenever countries engage into a military conflict with Muslims come back stronger in their faith, and it causes more problems. So why not then? I mean, save yourself all these headaches and so forth, and just send out these images, right, and make the people change themselves. It doesn't require armies. It doesn't require bloodshed. It doesn't require expenditure of capital in terms of billions of dollars that it does to prosecute a war, and so forth. Likewise, even if we were to say that they did not really, aim to, it wasn't really like a concerted aim on their part to change the Muslims, I mean, it was not part of a form of warfare, it is just natural that people want their ideas to spread. So just like Muslims want their ideas to spread, non-Muslim, unbelievers, want their ideas to spread. And people use whatever means they can to spread their ideas. I mean, it's just a natural fact of human nature. I mean, irrespective of whether we say that this is a concerted effort by the unbelievers to make war against Islam or not, it's just natural that people will spread their beliefs and their ideas. And so we should not expect from people other than this, and since they have the material wealth, the economic wealth, and the technological wealth for this, obviously their message is very strong. Now, so what is that I would like to leave with this audience, if I could, that we need to take the issue of media very seriously, and part of that is that we need to support efforts in Islamic media. And when we see a magazine, for instance, like Jama'ah magazine. This is a commercial for it. When we see a magazine like Jama'ah magazine, it's a magazine which I like very much. I know the brothers do. I mean, we should try to support it in what we can. I mean, if we can subscribe to the magazine, this is a good way to support Muslim endeavor. Likewise, also, we should take it further from that. For instance, to become critiques of the magazine in a positive sense, to send in our letters, to send in our suggestions, in order so our Muslim media reaches a higher level of excellence. Okay, and likewise, what's really important is that we need to train ourselves to become media savvy. The Prophet ﷺ did not set a special group of people for da'wah, a special group of people for commanding good and forbidding evil. Rather, the Prophet ﷺ said, the Muslims, بَلِّغُوا عَنِّي وَلَوْ آيَةً. Spread it by me, even an ayah. He didn't say this for a special group of people, that you're the ones who used to preach, but for all the Muslims. The Prophet ﷺ said that Allah makes the face of a person bright who hears my words and then transmits it as he has heard it. So the command to spread Islam falls upon all of us. And so therefore we need to become media savvy. How do you become media savvy? You need practice. I mean, if somebody finds an article written in a newspaper, let's say The Guardian or The Times, for instance, okay, all right, which has some sort of distortion of Islam. A brother reads that article, and he wants to correct that. Okay? The ability to write 2 paragraphs and to convey your ideas correctly and tersely, and be able to send it to the editor to have your comment, published, is a skill. If a person has never written a letter to an editor before, it's unlikely that he's going to be able to effectively write something. Likewise, if a person, if there's some sort of radio talk show, and people can call in and speak, right? If a person doesn't know how to present his statement in a minute or two to correct an idea without sounding, like he's crazy, or without sounding like he's just fanatic, oh, this is wrong, and you'll have to stop this and so much, then obviously that's a means which is, not there. If people do not know how to use effectively the internet, when you write on the internet and so forth effectively, to present a message is different than when you present a message by audio tape, by video, by printed book. So, how does one effectively use these things? How does one build an effective website to present Islam? These are all means within our abilities, okay? Likewise, Muslims there needs to be certain Muslims who go and learn the skills of journalism. There needs to be Muslims who learn the skills of satellite communication, other forms of communication, in order that these skills can then be used by a Muslim organization who wants to spread the Islamic message. And most importantly, right, we need to train ourselves by knowing our religion, right, and being good ambassadors to Islam through our deeds and through our conduct, and presenting, a general good image of Islam to people who we live around. And with that, I'll conclude. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك.
جزاك الله خير شكرا. Thank you very much for your questions. Inshallah, we'll start with the questions. There's a couple of questions on this. But before we go with that, Sheikh Ali, those who are converted to the internet and involved in sharing the net, as they say, the way that we across the net when we responded to the siege, the postings on the postings about the subject, I remember, for example, one brother made the point, what's your comment on that, saying that the fact that you have made so much effort and so much noise about it, some Muslims, when they hear about this film, for example, they will become very interested and go and watch the film, and therefore they become the tools in enhancing the budget of the dinner. Okay, so how could you talk about that?
Well, what Abu Bashir mentioned is a very reasonable and very correct comment. One of the things we did in Washington, D.C., was we had a group of brothers who went to see, there was a private screening. The film industry, the producers of the film had a private screening for the Muslims before the Muslim was released to the public. So we had some brothers who went to the private screening and they saw the movie. We told the other brothers in the class, no Muslim now should go to the movie. Why? Because we had some brothers who represented us, and they went to see the movie, and they came back and they gave us a report. So now we know what the movie's about, okay? And we trust them and so forth. We don't want to add to their coffers by spending $6 or $7, I don't know. It's been a while, so we don't want to do that and so forth. So, and also, for instance, when a reputable organization quotes the movie, it says that in the movie it says there's some dialogue and quote marks and so forth, that's sufficient. You do not yourself have to officially see the movie, make your official determination and so forth, to do a lot of the support work. But some Muslims obviously will have to see the movie in order to present the information. So. In Islam, we have to stay in certain boundaries. Examples, women cannot speak on the radio. We cannot have music on the radio. How can we make the Islamic media more attractive to people while staying within these Islamic boundaries? This is a very good question. I don't necessarily have a specific answer for you because I'm not, a journalist by profession or so forth. I'm a software engineer. But this is something when people would, study Islamic journalism, and there are universities, and some of the Islamic universities, for instance, do teach, journalism and so forth. And also brothers who would have experience in the field of journalism, they should be able to provide creative means by which they can present the message of Islam and, not fall into something which has been forbidden for us. So this is something which we need to, and if anybody's a journalist or if anybody has some experience in that, we can maybe hear a comment and like assist and so forth.
With due respect, Sheikh, what I would suggest is, just want to make a comment and maybe you can answer it in a way, is that I think we're being very naive if we think that we can watch their media and somehow have an equal response to counteract it. Because really, they're very, very skilled at media control. And as we know, the Jews are controlling the media, and they have a well-orchestrated plan to brainwash people against all religion, especially Islam, against Islam in this country. I'm not sure about America, but certainly in this country, it's against all religion, and especially Islam. And for us to try and think that we can somehow counteract it, this major world force existing, simply by sort of going to the internet or watching their films, etc., I think we're just falling into their trap. And really the only way you can counteract it is to totally ignore it like the Taliban stuff. Because the best thing the brothers can do is to say, right, we're not going to watch their television, we're not going to listen to their radio, unless it's only sort of news or something like that maybe. But otherwise, what the brothers are going to do is, this is what I'm going to suggest is, we're going to fall in the trap exactly as they want us to do. Is that we're going to watch their films and think that we're counteracting them, and in reality, we're only getting brainwashed. And the internet is just a trap to let in pornography. I mean, I had internet into my own home, and I realized that it was very, very dangerous. And their ideas are that you're getting knowledge. Somehow you're getting knowledge, and you're going to become more knowledgeable, and your children are going to get knowledge, but the reality of it is that you're just going to get brainwashed by their media. So you can't counter media by sort of getting into the radio and acting very clever and becoming very eloquent and think that you're going to impress them. We're not going to do that. The only way is that we remove television from our homes and say, we're not going to watch. And that's the thing that will really annoy them. The only thing that will get the Jews who control the media in this country is, you say to them, we're not going to watch television. That's the thing that will annoy them. And that's the only way we can counteract it.
And for the benefit of those who didn't hear clearly, you just summarize the
I'll summarize in my response. The brother was suggesting that it's not really reasonable to think that by merely trying to counter media, because they're so media savvy, they're so skilled in media, that by just trying to counter it, we'll be able to actually deter their media. The best policy is one of boycotting, like the Taliban have done, and other nations also. I mean, it's not just the Taliban. The Iranians have tried it. Even in Singapore, which is a predominantly non-Muslim country, they've also tried to restrict some of the media access. I personally feel that given the nature of media today, and this is maybe a point where you might disagree, that it's impossible to shut it off from your country or from your life. That it's so pervasive, and the nature of people are such that maybe you find some strict Muslims who will take off the television and not the radio. The majority of the Muslims, they really haven't reached that level of iman, and so they fall prey to that. Also, you have, 1 billion Muslims, you have, 4.5 billion non-Muslims. How do we reach them? Do we allow just their media to reach them, and we are unable to reach them? The only way we can reach them is, somebody stands in Regent's Park and says, so what I'm trying to suggest is that we need to have, skilled media. And, if we put our effort and rely upon Allah and have, sincerity in our intention, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be able, for a little effort, to bring some good to it. Some of the reactions that the brothers had during the movie The Siege was that, one brother told me that when people were passing by because they had heard about this, they said, I'm not going to spend my money on this movie. This is a Kafir who said that statement. Likewise, I think brothers who have, in the past, given talks on radio or have given an interview in the newspaper or have been interviewed by television, you'll find unbelievers who might have seen that or heard that come to you and really surprised. I remember one year I gave for the Muslims, they had asked me to give these 5-minute talks at Ramadan during Iftar time. Because the Muslims had bought a radio station, a Christian radio station, some time for it. So when I take these 5-minute segments, the Adhan would be said, and then you would have the Adhan would take about a minute, then you have 4 minutes, and you have to read an ayah or a hadith, What happened was the radio station received so many letters from non-Muslims who wanted to get that series of things. They were so enamored by it. It wasn't because of me. I would say it was because these are the words of Allah. Or the hadith of Prophet they say, well, how do I get a set of that? Which church is, doing this? Let me do those. So, the effect, inshallah ta'ala is there. And this is something which we can, disagree upon. I think we need to boycott, but I think in the reality most Muslims will not do that. So we need to also have a counter, and also to reach the non-Muslims, we need to have strong media.
Inshallah, we'll get for our letter so that the brothers don't feel disadvantaged and they get the questions and we'll every now and then
would you recommend to us that we should get involved in working for these media companies, and BT, Sky, etc.? And if so, are we required to hide our identity? Where do we draw the line? Well, the question of hiding one's identity, that's going to be part of one of the lectures tomorrow, so we'll leave that. As far as getting involved with these media companies, it depends on what's the involvement. Obviously, if you're a producer of a media show which involves something which is haram, that's not something which a Muslim should get involved with. But let's say you are a technician who understands satellite links and satellite and so forth, and you get some practical experience. Well, if there ever came a time, and inshallah sometime soon, we find Muslim organizations interested in having satellite technology. Then we have somebody who's skilled in doing satellite hookups and so forth as a technician. Or in terms of sound, or in terms of video and so forth. So these are skills that can be gained. Likewise, I know in the United States we have a number of non-Muslims who are producers, even some non-Muslims used to produce things in Hollywood, who became Muslim, and have now said we have all these skills in terms of producing films for dawah and so forth, in producing documentaries. Where's that Islamic organization, media organization, so we can now use these skills? And unfortunately, most of the times you have to shrug your shoulders and say, but inshallah, sometime soon. So I think that perhaps that should, okay. My brother has said, what's this question? Should I read it? Or? My brother has said to me plenty of times that a government has enough wealth to have a channel on TV. Why don't the Muslims come together to get global communications? Do you think it is necessary? Well, what I suggest to the brother who wrote the question is that he can write a letter to the ambassador of that country and say to him, Allah has blessed you with so much wealth, we'll hope that you would, put something like a satellite TV and so forth. But as far as me, I don't know how Islamic is the media willing to give airtime to Muslim deviant groups or worse non-Muslim groups that claim to represent Islam, Nation of Islam, Naqshbandi, and so forth. And what we found in the United States is that the media doesn't necessarily give its time to deviant Muslim groups because they're trying to push the deviant groups. But really what's happening is that the deviant groups go to these media installations and so forth and say that we're representatives of Muslims, would you like to make an interview with us? And some sort of issue would occur, they'll call them up, they'll put them in the list and so forth. And Muslim organizations, Muslims who are not, who are trying to follow the Sunnah, have a quick understanding of Islam, gone and did their homework, contacted the different media groups and so forth. The media would then contact them. Like in the United States, nobody is going to contact in the United States now, I would imagine, any group regarding a media issue outside of CARE. Why? Because they did their homework. They had a list of all the producers, all the film critics, all the different, stations and so forth, and they wrote them letters, and they invited them, and they called them. And one of the things that CARE does, for instance, is that during every Eid, they have like an Islamic day. They send to all the masjids a little a pamphlet and so forth, and a communique, and they tell them to contact your local news representative, contact your local news station, contact your local newspaper, and tell them to come to the message tomorrow for Eid. And you can tell them that these are some of the issues you might want to ask Muslims. These are, you sort of assist them in doing it. And here's a statement which you can then give to them, already prepared. That Eid is because of the end of fasting. And Muslims get fasted for the last month and so forth. So then what happens? The media takes that statement, puts it in there. They come there. They have a list of questions to ask the Muslims. They ask Muslims these questions. The Muslims are prepared there. They tell the media, if you come to the masjid, to make sure you're a woman, cover your hair, wear respectful dress, no shorts, and no smoking, and so forth. So they come there and they interview Muslims as human stories. Yeah, they might put it in the last stage of the newspaper, but it gets there. It's a start. And so. Inshallah, that's saying. Okay, so the question I was looking in English is, what is your thing if we set up an Islamic radio station before we set up a world Islamic radio station, before we establish a world Islamic army? Because it's thought what's the thought of I couldn't read this word. What's this word? I don't know. This, I guess, is again for most Muslims. Rather than knowledge, which in our world today is communications. Well, I think we need both. I mean, any nation which is going to be successful today, right? I mean, this is a thing from a secular point of view. Any nation which is to be successful, tries to raise a strong standing army. It tries to build a strong economic base. It tries to build a strong educational system. It tries to build a strong media base. And so therefore, as Muslims, Allah has commanded us in the Quran, muster what you can of strength. So, we're required to develop strong economic institutions, strong educational institutions, strong military institutions, strong media institutions. One should not think always, this is the question that always comes, it's either this or that. It's not this or that, it's both. And we all need to strive and to do our utmost in whatever means Allah has provided us. Already a lot of people, including some Muslims, have such a negative idea towards Islam. So how can we overcome this problem, which affects a lot of practicing Muslims? Well, the best way is by reaching out to Muslims, trying to talk to them, trying to show them the good of Islam, and there are many means. And some things we'll talk about in the lectures tomorrow. Is just to mention some of them. Writing letters, befriending a person, inviting him to a meal. The idea is to break down the barriers that people have, and that helps in spreading the message of Islam. Your comment on fighting like with like contradicts what you said earlier about us fighting with the traditional methods, that is swords hanging from the olive trees. Please explain. No. What I was mentioning earlier was that before the Day of Judgment, the Prophet ﷺ, when explaining to us the great battles that will occur before the Day of Judgment, indicated to us that these battles will occur using traditional weaponry like swords and horses and so forth. But we don't live in that time yet. That time is the time which will come. So when that time comes, we can worry about that type of traditional weaponry, horsemanship, and using bow and arrow and sword. But right now, people use these new technical means, and so therefore we need to become skilled in them. In 1948, the Prime Minister of England, Clement Attlee, expanded Mid-England's version of the FBI-CIA to include a section to spread anti-communist propaganda, forcing news stations to run false stories under the guise of national security. As Islam is seen as a new threat, it's now a matter of national security to align defame Islam its policy. That could be true. Maybe some governments have made that a policy, but whether it's the point is whether it's a policy, a concerted effort by some forces or not, it doesn't change the nature of what's happening, right? So we shouldn't get into the issue, well, it's a policy, it's a conspiracy against us, and so forth, right? There's a fact that there's negative portrayal against Islam, and it is our responsibility to clear up that fact, irrespective of what the cause of that portrayal is. So if it's now become national policy to defame Islam, and there's some sort of secret wing with the intelligence services, then so be it. But the point is that we have to spread Islam and give the correct message. Next week, the Nation of Islam is giving an interview on a national talk radio station in the UK. What should I do? Well, it's difficult to react at the last moment, okay? But, one of the things to do is try and talk to the radio talk show, perhaps send them a letter, send them some information, visit them, say that, that the Nation of Islam really doesn't represent the overwhelming majority of the Muslims. Muslims really don't even consider them to be Muslims. Is it possible that we could perhaps, have another section where we could explain that why we do not agree with the Nation of Islam and so forth? Perhaps they might respond. Even if they don't respond, maybe the second time they'll respond. Maybe the third time. You have to be continuous in this. Don't give up just because one time they say, well, who are you, and they just hang up. No. But rather, be continuous and be persistent. And inshallah ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open the door for you. I feel that possibly the best Islamic meeting today is da'wah to Muslims. The words and actions and how they respond to the negative portrayal of Islam. Is it allowed for Muslims, or is the sin taking off our necks if we do not give the message of Islam to everyone we know? Can we be happy with ourselves in our hijrah to the United Kingdom? Well, we're required to spread the message of Islam. And this is a requirement, it's just like you're required to pray. Allah has commanded us to pray. Now, when you pray, do you know that what your prayer is accepted by Allah? You don't. You do the prayer, and you hope that Allah accepts that act of worship. You wait, you partake in da'wah, you preach to Islam, and you hope that Allah accepts that act of worship. And at the same time, you feel in your heart, well, maybe I should make my efforts stronger so that I can please my Lord, because maybe I didn't give enough efforts to that. In the same way, that if I pray, you should always say, well, maybe I should concentrate more on my prayer. I should have more fear of Allah on my prayer. Constantly trying to improve yourself. And so, and then when on the day of judgment, you'll see whether you discharge your duty or not. But there's no way you can say, well, if you call 5 people, you discharge your duty, but if you call, if you don't call 5, you have to call 10, or it doesn't make sense. Likewise, what the brother said or the sister said, that our words and actions, yes, that's true. In the end, the way we people want to see Islam in practice, there are some people who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed, and they have enough intelligence that they can judge the virtue of something based upon it itself. But most of humanity needs to see it until they're willing to accept it. That's why the Arabs, naked Arabs, really waited for the Prophet to become over the place before they entered into Islam in great numbers. Present day facts, as I think, American culture revolves around Jews. Also, Jews have a strong loyalty in America. Lenin and Karl Marx were those who created communism. The Russians were very thankful to them for giving them communism, but now due to the fall of the Soviet Union, communism had a great lack, and communism now influences setback, right? And communism has now influence on common masses. Despite the fact that the American caused obstacle to the spread of Islam, yet now Islam is regarded as a fast-spreading faith. You're absolutely right. Islam is, with all the negative portrayal against Islam, Islam is still the fastest-spreading religion in the United States. But that doesn't mean because Islam is the fastest-spreading religion in the United States, we say, okay, well, we're doing a good enough job. But we're supposed to put our full efforts, and our utmost. And the Jews do have an exorbitant, effect on the media. And a lot of, Jewish culture and Jewish ideas are spread through the media. But in the end, whether it's Jewish media or Christian media or Hindu media or Buddhist media, the point is that we need to correct their distortion of Islam, and we need to bring Islam to them. Right? And so I think the responsibilities are still the same.
I have a simple point on this last question.
Okay.
It's a couple of questions actually. One from a brother. A comment that might serve that comment from the brother. I'm going to make a shift. The brother says, is it the time that we provide young people with some kind of entertainment in the mosque in order to attract them towards Islam in that way? And not to feel boring in the mosque environment. The other brother in Arabic expressing his opinion that he thinks, I would like to express the following point, and that is we cannot use the term Islamic media other than the shape of the writings. Yes, for example, papers, newspapers or magazines. As for anything else in here, we may fall into some debate. We get lost.
Right. Well, I guess that's the question now. I mean, if I understood what the brother was trying to aim at in his comments in Arabic, whether the portrayal of, images, right, is this permissible to Sharia or not? I mean, we know the Prophet ﷺ had strict, condemnation and forbade the drawing of pictures. And the reason why is it leads to shirk, and also it's resembling of the creation of law. But in terms of images, in terms of camera, and and then being spread, or photographs, and then being spread by means of satellite or television broadcast or video, and the scholars have different views. So those who consider this to be haram, and that it still falls under the prohibition of the Prophet ﷺ, I mean, I respect their opinion, and I would agree that we would have to restrict media then just to the voice or to written. But those who follow the opinion of those scholars who consider this to be permissible, provided the content is permissible, then these become means. And I mean, this is an issue really which you would have to ask the scholar, and I'm not. In general, I mean, the majority of the scholars in the Islamic world today do not view not photography, but do not view images in terms like video to be forbidden. The majority of the scholars, okay, and you have less scholars who view the permissibility of still photographs. And but there are opinions of those who consider it to be forbidden. And one can go and look at their arguments, and if one is convinced one way or the other, he should follow that. And we leave that at that. Let me ask this last question: provide young people some kind of entertainment in the mosque. If the entertainment is halal, of course. I mean, we need to. And I don't mean by entertainment here that you have music and rap and stuff like that. There's no misunderstanding. But I mean, obviously, youth have a different sort of need. I mean, it's difficult to sit a young man or a young girl to sit in a circle and, expect them to sit for 2 or 3 hours still and to listen to a lecture and stuff. They might find that boring, okay? Some do show a maturity early, they can do that. But for many, they cannot. And so therefore, one needs to find, means to entertain them. Let us not forget the example of the Prophet ﷺ's, Sirah, which you find in Sahih al-Bukhari, that when the Ethiopians were doing a type of, war, sort of dads in the Prophet's message, using spears and so forth, Aisha, who was a young girl, wanted to see that, and so the Prophet draw her near and covered her with her cloak in order to see that, in order to let her desire, to watch it to be fulfilled. It wasn't something which was haram. The type of play that the Ethiopians were doing was something which, it also had a military value because it uses spears and so forth. And it was a day of eating, which Muslims, the Prophet said, is a day of, relaxing and eating and drinking and so forth. So, and there is some precedence in the Sunnah to that. So, to make events for young boys in particular, events like sport activities and so forth. And one should not think of this that is forbidden, but rather these are good ways to develop skills in youth in terms of communication, in terms of teamwork, in terms of developing their bodies, and at the same time sit them down, teach them how to pray, teach them how to read the Quran. And as far as young girls, I don't know, but maybe I'll push you has some opinions for that. But I mean, I'm sure there are some similar activities would be good for young Muslim girls, and they would find it exciting and so forth.
I appreciate that a few people are raising their hands. We are running out of time, so I shall give one note.
You're in charge.
Well, inshallah, we'll leave it, because may I point out, brothers and sisters, that as you are advising the program in the template like this, the final lecture of the series is purely dedicated for answering questions that you have raised or to be raised. And all these unanswered questions will be put to the Sheikh, and we shall select enough for that session, inshallah. And perhaps have already enough for that session. But that shouldn't put you off for these more questions, inshallah. جزاكم الله خير for listening. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.